Mr. Sununu, I might put a couple of questions to yourself, if that's all right. Your organisation joined the two airlines here and some other airlines in taking a case against the passenger cap in the Irish High Court, I understand. That was referred to the European Court of Justice, and there was an opinion of the Advocate General in the Court of Justice in February of this year. Is it fair to say that the Advocate General opinion came out fairly strongly against your position and held that the passenger cap isn't a violation of EU law?
Yeah, I know it is fair, but again, that's why this body needs to act, because the detrimental effects of that would be huge, and that's why again if we can sit around and stay and have things stayed, we can sit around and wait till what happens this fall. We can sit around for another court hearing, but. You know, if I may, I want to address something that was brought up. You lose 10 or 15% of the passengers. Sorry, you lose 10 or 15% of the jobs.
This is my bit of question. I only have 8 minutes. And obviously the Court of Justice follows the Advocate General's ruling in about 70 to 80%. So I say that because the term violated, unlawful, these words have been used quite a lot today, and it's just the clearest statement we have from the European Court of Justice is that the passenger cap is not in breach of law. Now, I understand we're waiting for a court decision from the Court of Justice, but I just think it's important that that's on the record.
But it violates our agreement that our countries have had. It's a direct violation of that, clear as day.
On open skies. Did your legal team raise the violation of open skies when the matter was discussed in the Irish High Court?
Yeah. In the Irish High Court, this was our position. Before the European Court of Justice, the matter of international law is not under consideration. Why didn't that come into because as it was referred to by the Irish High Court, they only sent them a question about EU domestic law. So as it applies within the EU, but not as it applies to the commitments of Ireland under the US-EU Open Skies Agreement.
And are there processes under the Open Skies Agreement where the issues that your organisations have with the passenger cap can be addressed?
Sure. Yeah. So under the Open Skies Agreement, there are obligations from each side to allow for these flights to occur. When those flights don't occur, then there are provisions within the agreement and provisions within the regulations of the U.S. Department of Transportation to discipline the marketplace to ensure that we have fair and equal opportunity to compete.
And where an issue comes up, is there a concept of a joint committee being convened to examine the particular issue and look to tease out a resolution?
Under the US-EU Open Skies Agreement, there is a provision for a special session of a joint committee, and those conversations can happen formally or informally, and our understanding is that the US government, the EU, and the Irish governments are having those conversations informally.
So has a joint committee on the concerns with the passenger cap been established?
So the Joint Committee is an establishment that sets aside is apart from any particular issue. It meets annually, and this issue was raised in the last Joint Committee.
And what's the resolution on it from the Joint Committee?
That the EU would continue to work on the issue.
In what way?
That's a great question, and that's why we're here. For a resolution, we're looking for a resolution. So a Joint Committee is basically a policy talk shop between the two governments. Your organisation, Mr. Sununu, I think it's previously taken a case about an EU measure, an EU-wide measure, the emission trading system having potentially breaching the Open Skies Agreement, and I think the emission trading system was found not to breach Open Skies. Is that correct?
I believe that's right. Yeah.
That was from 2011. The overall decision on Open Skies, I suppose, you've been very clear in your submission, Mr. Sununu. You said that there's a risk of retaliation here, and I suppose it's just not clear to me where it has been established that there is a violation of Open Skies.
Open Skies Agreement is very clear that you allow unfettered, unlimited access to the capacity of the airport. This wouldn't be doing that. This airport could take 40 million people. But you're saying, no, we're going to limit it. We're going to violate that open, free access. You can have as many flights you want, as many passengers as you want. That's all understood. but this violates that. Yeah.
But I suppose it's your understanding, it's your position, it's your organisation's position that there's a violation, but it actually hasn't.
It's the U.S. government's position as well.
And the U.S. government's position, but it actually hasn't been found to be a violation at any point at this stage, has it?
Yes, it has. Read the statement. It's a clear violation. You cannot artificially limit access. That's a violation. That's it.
With respect to you saying you think that it's a violation, isn't a finding that it's a violation. Like this is an international agreement, and I'm not clear. Has the legality been tested in an international forum that the cap here represents a violation?
What I would offer for you is that the Irish High Court's issuing of a stay shows that there is irreparable harm, and the reason that standard is used in the court to issue a stay is that they look at the case and say it is far more likely that there is a problem here under this agreement. Therefore, we issue the stay so that the airlines and those parties to the agreement are not harmed unnecessarily while we figure out exactly how the application of the agreement.
Well, with respect, the stay is related to the process of referring a case up to the European Court of Justice, and it's not unusual.
No.
If I may give a perspective on this. From an Aer Lingus perspective, US Airlines have not suffered any past or present harm in relation to the passenger cap because of the legal strategy that has been implemented that has resulted in a stay on the enforcement of the passenger cap and the reference to the Court of Justice of the European Union. So it's our view that there's no past or present harm. And that's reflected in the capacity growth that's been seen through in Dublin and to Ireland from North American carriers. However, it is incumbent on the government to urgently pass the legislation, issue the ministerial order so as to ensure that there is no future harm. But it's our strong view, and I think it's borne out by the facts, that there has been no past or present harm to date.
Okay. In terms of open skies, does it provide an unlimited right to slots for US airlines across European, an unlimited right? That's your contention?
As long as they're available, yes, to the point of availability. To the point of availability.
And is the ruling or the opinion of the Advocate General, is that not very clearly stating under EU law that the constraint that the cap represents is one of those issues that, in this case, the Irish airport authorities have to take into account in determining whether there's capacity? Is that not one of the central findings of the Advocate General?
But that's applicable to EU domestic legislation. That sits underneath the international treaty obligations of the government of Ireland and that of the EU and of the United States. They supersede those issues. So while you can have a cap that might apply to domestic routings here, that cap would not apply then to the international operation.
And in the Irish courts, you didn't ask the judge to refer that question, because that really seems to be the nub of it, that balance between EU law and the Open Skies Agreement. You didn't ask that to be referred up to the Court of Justice, did you?
It is not a question for the European Court of Justice. No, it is not.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. When the passenger cap was introduced in 2007, it wasn't meant as a climate mitigation measure. It was based on infrastructure. And look, if we were designing a climate measure for Dublin Airport, certainly I wouldn't be picking a cap. I don't think that's an effective one. But nevertheless, I think we all recognise that removing the cap and the consequent growth in flights in and out of the airport is going to have a climate implication. And both our airlines here today have made it very clear they're looking to grow numbers, grow flights through the airport. So across all the 5 opening statements we got today, I was very struck that the issue of climate didn't come up at all. Now, I'm conscious you're all here, you're representing stakeholders, you're representing shareholders, but I suppose as legislators we have to look at the whole picture here as well. So maybe just to the 2 airlines, to Ryanair and to Aer Lingus, is there any upper limit to the growth of Dublin Airport that you'd see as acceptable? And how do the very significant growth plans that you outline for your 2 airlines, how does that impact on Ireland's international obligations under the Paris Agreement in terms of reducing our climate emissions?
Could I just comment globally? Because I've heard people say this, that passenger numbers are a proxy for environmental issues. It's not. So just to give you an example, since 2007 globally, passenger numbers have doubled from about just under 2.5 to 2.5 billion to 5 billion. In the same period, CO2 emissions have increased by 45%. So it's not a like for like, because the industry has become more efficient. Now, except CO2 has increased, but I think people who say there's a direct correlation.
And I didn't say it was a like for like, Mr. Walsh.
So therefore, you can continue to grow the passenger numbers without a meaningful impact on the environment.
Without a meaningful impact in the environment?
Yes, without a meaningful impact on the environment, yes.
So the growth, let's say the growth from 32 million, the cap at the moment, to 40 million, you don't think there'll be a meaningful increase in CO2 emissions as a result of that?
No, I don't, because it will depend on the aircraft that are being used, the routes that are being operated, the type of fuel being used in the air. There are a lot of factors that would input into that. Aircraft that are being introduced are significantly more fuel efficient than the aircraft that they're replacing.
And then if we go beyond, and I suppose that to my other question, if we go beyond 40 million, a wider growth of Dublin Airport and the throughput of passengers, you again think that can be done?
Well, as an industry, we have committed to achieving net zero by 2050. So these things go hand in hand. The longer-term objective to get to net zero in 2050, which will be facilitated by a number of measures, including the use of sustainable fuels, new technology, advances in air traffic control.
SAF is still very much in its infancy, isn't it, fair to say, Mr. Walsh? Yeah. So there's a lot of hope in your reliance on SAF at the moment to meet that net zero target. Is it not fair to say?
I'd say it's more than hope. It's a reality. We know that it's technologically possible. As you know, the EU is mandating the use of sustainable fuels, and that governments around the world are facilitating that, and several governments are also incentivising the production of sustainable fuels.
But Mr. Walsh, at the scale to both replace the fuel in existing flights and meet the fuel in the new flights that I say both of our airlines have indicated they wish to drive forward, it's a huge ask in terms of carbon neutrality by 2050 on the technology that is still in its infancy.
It is a big ask, but it is technically possible to achieve it. And that is we have demonstrated there is a credible path to net zero in 2050. It is extremely difficult, challenging and expensive, but it is a credible path.
Could I ask maybe the airlines, Mr. Wilson, you might comment on that?
Willie makes the point on the longer term in terms of net zero, but in the absolute short term with the cap, and you take it down to a company level with Ryanair, we have 300 aircraft coming, the most fuel efficient aircraft on the market, and they're going to go somewhere in Europe. The question is, how many of them are going to come to Dublin? And if the cap is imposed, not only will there be no growth, but it'll go backwards. So, the climate debate can't be in a silo over Ireland. It's going to be, in the case of all this extra capacity that we're going to bring, it's just going to go elsewhere. And we're well aware of our commitments, and it's not all in terms of our climate credentials, and I'm not going to list them all here now, but what I can say is that this is the hub of economic activity, like on an island, and we're going to have to do something about that. Otherwise, these aircraft are going to go. They're going to go elsewhere. And we're going to export that to other, in the case of Ryanair, to other European countries. In the case of Aer Lingus, they lose they've less traction on their hub status, and we're giving away all the good work that we've put in over the last number of years.